I will, Sandy, the next thing. Donald Trump talked about the fact that he is going to apply all these tariffs, right? And so he's going to change the economy because he's going to place all these tremendous tariffs on all of the goods that come into this nation. How much of that is truth and how much of that is fiction?
Well, we have to find out. I mean, I worry that Donald Trump doesn't understand tariffs. My hope is that he will have around him people who do, that he will have some good advice. Last time he had Peter Navarro, who has always been known as a tariff hawk, and maybe wouldn't provide him with the kind of advice he needs. But across the board tariffs promise to do a great deal of damage to our economy, and lots of the financial community understands that and worries about that. And the question now is whether he will do it. Senator Ron Johnson was making apologies for that policy and saying, well, that's not going to happen. So, it's just his economic policies were all over the map. And which, if any of them, he attempts to implement, I think we can be quite confident that his tax reductions are something that will get pursued because the Republican Party seems to be married to tax reductions. He will have to get things that need to go through Congress through the filibuster process, the cloture vote process in the Senate, unless the Republican majority decides to back off from that. So I worry about the tariff policy because I think it could have the potential to do great damage to the economy.
So let's see if we've got our phone lines repaired. Calvin, do we have our phone lines repaired?
Yeah, we should be all set. Let's go to Tom from LA.
Good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Hello, Earl?
Yes.
Okay. First off, we the people ultimately are the government. We need to get complete money out of politics. I would like to congratulate the people on the right, what I call the wrong side of the aisle. I'm a competitor. We competed hard and we lost. And that's not easy for me to say today, but I want to congratulate them. I really do think that the American people do vote against their best interests. You guys were talking before about, I don't know, this elitist craziness or whatever it is that you guys were talking about. There's so much more to this than that. This has now become like Animal Farm. This is going to become like the Blues Brothers having a big, party. It just does not seem like they're going to have the most competent people in we the people government, and that does scare me. I am also scared for my own safety. Luckily, I live in California, but for any LGBTQ plus person out there, day one on this whole thing with the transgender thing, that's all they had in their commercials, transgender, and it really is quite the joke.
All right, Tom. Thank you very much for the call. 855-752-4842 is the number. It's very special after election edition of the Earl Ingram Show with my co-host Sandy Williams and you.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
All right, welcome back to a very special after-election edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. That's 855-752-4842. My co-host Sandy Williams has joined us. Let's go right back to the phone lines. Let's go to Mike from Kenosha. Thank you very much, Mike. You say what?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for taking my call as always. I'm not quite as conciliatory this morning. And the reason being is I think there's three major culprits. And first part of it is the Dems did not show up. The American people did not show up. And when you don't show up, you have to suffer the consequences sometimes. But more importantly, you know, this is going back to truth to power in the truth, if you will. When January 6th, 4 years later, 3 3/4 years later, they can still dispute what our eyes and our ears saw and heard, when they can use that as misinformation in the Justice Department, and Merrick Garland takes a 4-year hiatus from delving into January 6th. This should be settled. This should have been settled, many of these issues. But let's talk about January 6th. That should have been settled that spring. And here it's being used as a weapon in our elections 4 years later to just confuse everybody. So no, I'm not into this conciliatory mood. I think the judges put their thumbs on the scale. We have documents cases and other cases. We have a complete administration that denied subpoenas. It wouldn't testify. And yet many of them weren't jailed or held accountable. No. What we have learned here is our system. We have allowed it to grow warts. Our infrastructure for democracy, and those infrastructure things are unity. They are trust. They have been whittled away, primarily because the media doesn't do their job. They continue to allow these falsehoods to go on. And when falsehoods are not confronted, they grow, and they create their own reality. And when they create their own reality, it's very, very difficult to change the minds later. So,
Hey,
no,
Mike,
I'm not
Mike,
conciliatory.
I wish I had more time. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Paul from Spooner. Good morning to you, Paul. You say what? Paul from Spooner.
Mentions Project 2025 mentions Donald Trump's name over 300 times. We know what the plan is. He's also talking, I believe Trump is talking about, I'm concerned about, I don't know, once again, I'm confused. My thoughts are really rambling, but we can sit and say, we also know that Donald Trump is making threats, and he doesn't have the boundaries to hold them together like we did before. He's got a Supreme Court that's giving him free run now. He can do whatever he wants. He's talking about the insurrectionists, getting them out of prison. He's also talking about using the military to go after people, citizens. But I believe that the military might back up. But I believe that he's got a private army that's going to be coming out that'll do his dirty work for him. Just like any other mob boss. It's all done with winks and nods, and it'll get done. So I do feel much less safe today than we did before, and I trust J.D. Vance less. So.
Hey, Paul, thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Cindy from Appleton. Good morning to you, Cindy. Your thoughts?
Well, Earl, I think this is going to be turning out to be one of the darkest days in the history of the United States. I cannot believe that people have put this man back in power. I thought that this country wanted to fix the divisiveness. Thought this country wanted to heal. I thought this country wanted a president that was going to do for the people, not just for the rich. We are in such dire straits here. I am, along with your last caller, I am not in any kind of conciliatory mood. As a matter of fact, I am freaking terrified today. We are in big doo-doo, and I wish people that would have voted for this man could have understood this beforehand.
Cindy, thank you very much for the call. Sandy, you want to respond to any of that?
Well, I do. I think Mike, in terms of his discussion of the social infrastructure, that's what I was referring to. Our social infrastructure, which includes a grip on truth and a requirement of truth, it includes fact sourcing and fact sources that we've lost, and our dependency and our requirement that people speak the truth seems to have been lost. And we've exposed the fact that the American processes rely on people keeping and operating within norms, and that the laws themselves aren't enough of a guardrail because laws take a long time to enforce, and our courts aren't a reliable place for enforcing laws. So, I am worried about the fact that the American processes, the norms have been tested, the norms have been ignored, and when the norms are ignored, we're left with a system which is more vulnerable than I think we thought. And I think this election exposes those vulnerabilities. And my hope is that we move on from it in a manner that corrects them.
All right. 855-752-4842. Very special after election edition of the Earl Ingram Show. My co-host Sandy Williams are going to be joined next by Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, and you on the Earl Ingram Show.
What a wonderful
It's time to get organized with Dr. Craig and Citizen Action. Working for democracy and taking on economic, racial, and environmental issues across Wisconsin and around the United States. Here's Earl Ingram with Dr. Robert Craig.
All right, welcome back to a very special edition of the After Election Earl Ingram Show. I'm joined by my co-host Sandy Williams, and as always, Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Before we go to you guys, CJ's been waiting for a while. Let's get CJ on. CJ, good morning. You say what?
Good morning, Earl. Thanks for taking my call, and to Sandy and Dr. Craig, the two guys I would love to debate anytime, anywhere. Last night was pretty amazing. One thing we found out, 70% of Americans thought we were headed in the wrong direction.
Well, CJ, it wasn't 70%. Okay, let's get that straight. It was not 70%, but go ahead. He won raise the thin margin, CJ, but go ahead.
Okay, well, like the caller from LA always says, we the people, and they spoke. He actually won the popular vote by 5 million. And Earl, 24% of black men voted for him. And you laughed at me the first time, and that's up from 8%. You laughed at me. The black men, the black community, and all of America has watched as this candidate said she wouldn't do anything.
All right, CJ, thank you very much for the call. Dr. Craig, we don't need to rehash that. Dr. Craig, your thoughts on what transpired last night?
Well, you're right. It was an extremely close election. And, Nate Cohen had a very good election day article in the New York Times that had 4 scenarios. In other words, the polling didn't really tell us what was going to happen. It was all margin of error, and we don't know who's going to turn out, which adds further error to a poll. And so, and it's really a combination of Cohen's 3rd and 4th scenarios. So we didn't know it was going in. And I think ultimately, there are a lot of factors we could dig into, right? But if you look at just to be fair, because liberals, we look at social science, natural science, and glean what we can from it and then apply it to human affairs. So if you look at 80 years of opinion research in political science and other related social science disciplines about voting, the one common denominator is that when people feel that their economic conditions have been worsened, and they don't have long attention span, so it's a relatively recent time horizon, then they tend to blame the incumbent, period. And what's unique here is I don't know if there was an economic variable that would explain it. The one that explains it in terms of opinion research over 80 years and looking at voting data is whether people's relative incomes, the cost of living versus their income, has gone up or down in the last quarter and a half or so. Don't know. We don't know that number. So maybe that will hold, maybe it won't. But the point is that perception, and therefore Biden's very low approval ratings, which were linked mostly to that, was quite frankly an anchor around the Harris campaign that she was trying to overcome. She was trying to swim across a channel with a big anchor, and she didn't quite make it. She performed given people's opinions of the economy and their, quite frankly, short memories of what the Trump economy was like. She did remarkably well, you could argue, and overperformed if you look at how important that is to voting. And what that research also shows is that voters do not punish incumbents fairly. They tend to punish incumbents for bad news. So it doesn't matter that COVID caused most of the inflation spike and the disruption of the pandemic. It doesn't matter that a lot of things like trade policies President Biden did not implement and was trying to change in a lot of ways caused this. What matters is I'm not doing well. And by the way, all of the attacks on economic security, Earl and Sandy, over the decades have created a greater sense of anxiety where half the population can't afford a $400 surprise bill, and any interaction with the healthcare system results in one pretty much. You don't know where it came from. So President Biden and Kamala Harris did not cause that. They were trying to fix it. But the voters acted as voters have done in the United States and Western Europe, and voted out incumbents based on that economic insecurity and the feeling that things were hard for them economically and were getting worse.
I heard Donald Trump say yesterday, or it might have been the day before, at one of his rallies, that I'm going to give Kennedy control of the healthcare system. And so this is what we're talking. This is what we're looking at. The height of insanity to say that, and he can do what he will. It's what I heard Donald Trump say. Let's say that he does turn that over to Robert F. Kennedy, either Sandy or Dr. Craig. It's a possibility, that this can happen. And so when we talk about why people felt uncomfortable and the conditions that they, kind of had to go through, I just still, it's puzzling and troubling to me that they think that turning this over to a guy like Donald Trump is going to fix all those things.
Well, yeah, I think what Robert talked about, it makes a lot of sense and is actually is very, very clearly true. And that is that incumbents get punished regardless of their connection to the problem for whatever it is that occurs during their presidency. And I hope the Republicans are watching that, because as Robert said, the problems of the middle class have been 25 and 30 years in the making, okay? And this has been a long trend line with healthcare becoming a bigger and bigger problem, with child daycare becoming an expense that can't be borne, with more and more people in our society living paycheck to paycheck. And so if the Republicans are smart, they're going to realize that the next incumbent is going to be a Republican. And if they don't start paying attention to those issues and trying to fix those issues, and if all they do is lower taxes like they did in 2017, they're going to be punished in the very same way. And so, I think that, the electorate maybe isn't too sharp and isn't too clear about understanding what they're doing, but it is very clear what they do, which is they do punish incumbents for situations that occurred during the period of incumbency. And, the Republicans would be smart to try to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't use his worst impulses and rather is held in check, so that they don't get blamed in the massive sort of way that they might. Were they to break this thing in the manner that he promises to potentially break the system?
Dr. Gray?
Very true. And quite frankly, I think Earl and Sandy, you're very well versed in things. There's only one other two-term president who didn't serve contiguous terms, who lost and then won again, and that's Grover Cleveland. What people forget is that the Great Depression before the Great Depression in the 1930s was what happened in the second administration of Grover Cleveland. He became one of the most unpopular presidents in American history and wasn't even much exhilarated after he served his term in office. Ultimately caused a huge realignment after a while in American politics, the progressive era, then the New Deal. It really started with the Depression of the 1890s in Grover Cleveland. And so the problem is that we don't really know. I mean, it looks like Donald Trump will be less contained than last time and intends to follow through on his campaign rhetoric. And I have no reason to believe otherwise. But look, if he does the tariff, right, the huge tariff, he's going to be destabilizing the whole global economy that our prosperity relies upon. Now, the stock market went up, mainly apparently because there's at least not going to be a fight over the election. but all of the European and international indexes went down because they're afraid of the tariffs. And it's going to hugely affect Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, the whole European Union, Great Britain, etc. And
and Dr. Craig, just to jump on that while you're talking about it, that inflation also promises to do great damage to the U.S. economy, much the way the inflationary tariffs that were installed during the Great Depression. Okay, the beginning of the Great Depression, and much of the Great Depression is attributed to those very tariffs. So the tariff policy promises to be very destabilizing and inflationary, along with a tax reduction that he promises also to be very inflationary. So his economic promises almost assure us that we will move into something that looks like stagflation.
And he wants to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. Well, that is a massive investment in our economy. That will tend to damage, if he's able to get away with it, economic growth, right? He wants to do something to the Affordable Care Act. Remember, he has some sort of principles that they've been working on for year after year without announcing them. That would greatly impact every working family and everyone who is not Medicare or Medicaid eligible, because it's not just a matter of the people who get their insurance in the Affordable Care Act and cannot be denied based on their health, right? It's a backup plan for everyone else. So a lot of people feel so more secure. I mean, I have a major senior staff person who's leaving his position because he knows he can go on the Affordable Care Act. Well, he won't have that if they're successful.
All right. We've got to take a short hiatus. You're tuned into a very special edition of the Earl Ingram Show after Election Day. And my guest, co-host Sandy Williams, and the one and only Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action, 855-752-4842. You can join us.
If
folks in Sahara Desert says it all. It's America. All God's creations, great and small. The Golden Gate and the Taj Mahal. That's America. That's two babies being born.
All right, welcome back to a very special after-election edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. My co-host Sandy Williams is with us, as well as Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Jim from Eden. Good morning to you, Jim. You say what?
Yes, good morning, Earl. Thank you for taking my call. I think what happened is Christians turned out yesterday. It was a referendum on God, and they turned out because they didn't like the direction that the country was going. There's an Overton window. Mr. Overton came up with this spectrum of ideas on public policy and social issues considered acceptable by the general public at any given time. And I think the pendulum swung, way to the left. And what you saw yesterday was a moving back the other way.
Jim and Sandy and Robert can respond. I don't disagree with you that and I talk with many Christians who agreed with you that this was about the fact that Christianity was in fact being challenged, the tenets of Christianity, and I think many of us may have overlooked. I know with black pastors in the city of Milwaukee, their focus was constantly talking about Christianity and the Bible and the fact that they were opposed to abortion and all those different things, whether or not, that many of us think that that's the place in this nation that it should take a prominent place in the election. That's up to everybody's discretion. I don't think it has a place in our elections, but many do. Sandy, Dr. Craig, you want to respond?
Well, I actually had a question for the caller because I hear people saying, and there's a lot of polling in which people say they think the country's been going in the wrong direction socially. And my question is, what are you talking about? What is it about our culture that you think is going in the wrong direction that relates to the religious issue you've described? Is it the gender and LGBTQ issues, or what are the issues that when you're talking about? Because it's all kind of cloaked in words that don't have a meaning to me.
Yes, one is exactly what you said. I go to school board meetings and talk about children who young children are having their body parts mutilated, and I think that's what is swung. There's this acceptance that that's normal to mutilate children, and that's what I
really. I mean, is that factually based? It strikes me that people talk about that, and Donald Trump would talk about how schools were performing or authorizing and performing sex change operations without the authority of the parents. But all of that was factually debunked, I think. Is that an accurate portrayal of what's going on, or is that a fearful description of what people are afraid is going on?
According to the Sconey report, October 14th, 2024, taxpayers spent more than $110,000 for irreversible sex change interventions. I mean, if that's a lie, that's what was reported.
So hang on, sir. Dr. Craig, you want to respond to that? Because there are people who believe that, like this caller.
And I think Sandy, had a good line of inquiry there. And I think Sandy was getting to how scripturally based is that analysis. And specifically when you're talking about Christian framework, and then specifically how factual is the representation of what's going on. But I would say, look, if you look at the history of Christianity, my Lord, there was a schism between the Catholic and the Orthodox part of Catholicism. Then there was a Reformation and the creation of many different denominations of Protestantism, and they do not have an agreement on the thing. So when the caller says the Christian position, it's not taking into account the diversity of Christianity. There are many Christian faith traditions which are almost as numerous as the one I think the caller is coming from. In other words, more of an evangelical tradition, that have a different perspective on all of these social issues and a different perspective on what the teachings of Jesus are in the Bible, and believe, and this is from the old prophet, the Old Testament prophets, that we are called upon, and from Jesus' words, to care the most for the least among us. And trans kids who have medically diagnosed gender dysphoria, where that affect their whole lives, the medically directed thing to do is what's happening. And you're just not going to find any scriptural basis for saying that this is a violation of Christian doctrine. And it's a bit like abortion. The Southern Baptist Church was relatively pro-choice until a decision was made in the 70s that was a great political issue. So there's a fair amount on the right-wing part of Christianity of taking political positions and then trying to say that they came from religious faith. And I know the caller's in earnest, but I think that some of the leaders of this movement have politicized their own version of Christianity.
855-752-4842, a very special after-election edition of the Earl Ingram Show, joined by my co-host Sandy Williams and also Dr. Robert Craig, Executive Director of Citizen Action. Guys, hang on the phone lines. We'll come to you shortly. All right. Welcome back to a very special election after election edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. My co-host Sandy Williams is with us, as well as Dr. Craig. Sandy, the music.
Yeah, just Unity music. I played it yesterday. I'm playing it again today. There's a there's a lot of it to choose from, and I hope we can move in that direction.
All right, I want to, Sandy, give you a chance to respond to the last caller before the break who invoked Christianity. And there's no question that organized Christianity played a major outcome in this election. I know inside of, the black clergy, that was the message that was hammered away by many of those pastors as far as abortion and all those kinds of things. And I don't know if the Democratic Party saw that coming or if there was anything they could do about it. Your response, Sandy?
Well, I just think that the whole issue was teed up in a disproportionate and factually inaccurate sort of a way. I mean, even the data that this gentleman provided on the mail, $110,000, you realize that that's probably 2 medical procedures in terms of the numbers of people. And the numbers of people affected by all this is so small. So what we've got is a very small community. Some would call it marginalized. I mean, the Democrats have, I think, come to the protection of what could be marginalized communities, and I think that the Republican game to be played with it was to try and magnify it and suggest that this is what Democrats are all about, and it was all fiction, and it was all fear, and it was all a discussion that such that somebody as well-meaning as that caller could think that this election was really a referendum on God, and then the question is what is the God, what is the liturgical thought they have in mind about what God stands for, that they're worried about in terms of the direction of our country, and all of that I think requires factual inquiry and a factual discussion, and that's not what we've had.
Dr. Craig?
Yeah, no, Sandy had the right term. It's teed up, right, to create disgust, outrage, and backlash politics. And if you look at it historically, new groups that seem alien, unknown to most people are selected. So in the 70s, in the 50s, it was just gay people being in government and the Department of State at all and being some security risk all trumped up. It was called the Lavender Scare. In the 70s, it was lesbian and gay teachers who were being in schools and supposedly recruiting kids. That's what Anita Bryant was campaigning against. And now it's trans kids who have a suicide rate of very high, the highest suicide rates of any classification of young person. And it's being exploited. And you see it in other areas. I talked to a lot of voters. I did a lot of doors and even more phone banks where we were having deep conversations. And I talked to voters about that were right-wing, Trump voters about partial birth abortion. That hardly ever happens. It's in the rarest of cases. And this is when these situations, when the woman's about to die, right? And it's an unviable pregnancy, and it comes late in the term, and they've turned into this thing where they think that this is a common thing, and doctors all over the place are doing these partial birth abortions of babies that are about to be born and are viable. It's just a lie. And if this was based on faith and religion, for real, wouldn't it be grounded in the actual situation, not a kind of made up propaganda designed to incite you and convince you that horrendous things are going on the other side that you have to stand up to? And I'll hold it up. I mean, you got door knockers from Trump all over Milwaukee with a beautiful little baby. And
Yes.
how he's going to protect them from partial birth abortion, him and Eric Hovde. It's just not a thing in any large numbers, and the result of their bans is to slaughter women. We have women dying because they can't get medical care late in a pregnancy when it goes wrong.
Let's go to David from Mequon. Good morning to you, David. You say what?
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
All right, go ahead.
Really quickly, I think what was surprising to me was that not only did she not win any swing states, but all 50 states, she underperformed it in all 50 in comparison to Biden in 2020. And that tells me that a lot of it had to do with the economy. It had to do with the fact that we've had millions of people, basically come over the border unchecked. And I know you're going to say, well, Trump stopped the whole thing. The difference was in that policy that was proposed was a huge amnesty. And I've listened to Dr. Craig now for the last few years, and you will be very thankful that the filibuster is not going to be taken away from you, because if it is, the minority party, in this case, the Democratic Party, would be really up the creek without a paddle. But as long as that filibuster is in place, you're going to have a seat at the table. So I would look into that going forward, because at the end of the day, we do have to work together. It can't be one party rule.
Hey, Dave. Thank you very much for the call. You want to respond to that, Sandy or Dave? Or Dr. Craig?
Well, the filibuster rule is sauce for the goose and for the gander, and it remains in place. It's controversial. It does give disproportionate power to the minority, and while it's in place, although the Republican majority did suspend it for certain things, like for judicial appointments, right? So they've decided discretionally to exercise their power when, as, and if they choose. And they were the ones to suspend it, not the Democrats.
Dr. Craig?
I think, frankly, yeah, and it goes back, Sandy. Harry Reid did the nuclear option because McConnell was holding up all of Obama's judges, and then McConnell then went and extended this to remove suspending it for Supreme Court justices, which is how they were able to pack the Supreme Court. But I've always thought that the party that will eliminate the filibuster, which allows 25% of the population to veto the rest, it makes our government in many ways unworkable in a modern context. That'll be done by Republicans. And if there's something Donald Trump really wants that is being filibustered, I believe that I don't believe there's any philosophical commitment to the filibuster coming from Donald Trump or his party. It's been convenient when they don't have a majority, then it's a holy writ and cannot be violated. I don't know why people think it's inviolate. The only reason it exists is because it's included in rules at the beginning of every Senate session, and the majority party decides the rules, and they can change the rules anytime during the session. So the new speaker, the new Senate majority leader, will be able to eliminate the filibuster or change it whenever they want to pass something, if they really want to do it, and President Trump wants it.
Let's go to Robert from West Dallas. Good morning to you, Robert. You say what? Robert. All right, let's go to Eric from Tulsa. Good morning to you, Eric. You say what?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Hello. This is Eric from Tulsa, but
yes,
thank
sir.
you.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, good morning, and sorry for the raspy voice.
No problem.
This is definitely disappointing and not at all surprising. First thing I told my mom last night is we better keep this guy alive, to be honest. And without being disrespectful, I believe holding up, quote unquote, the economy is something I would expect the know-nothing party to say. Willful ignorance aided by propaganda and domestic terrorism won this election. And it speaks volumes that American, quote unquote, Christians are rejoicing in the re-election of a rapey, racist felon. This is why they're losing their flock on the daily. We, the white people in this country, came to Benedict Donald's rescue while also preserving our own standing. Not thinking he was going to jail if he lost and other folks were going to see a better day, we decided that rich white men still got to remain above the law. And really quickly on the North Carolina election, it tells me that millions of us like Nazis, just not black Nazis. And regarding our state's many public school referenda, it seems our well-to-do white communities still know how to take care of their own. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Hey, Eric, thank you very much for calling. Anybody want to respond to any of that? All right.
I would just add to one thing. The caller's right about the propaganda. It wasn't necessarily the economy, it was the public perception of the economy. And of course, the way that was described by the right-wing propaganda machine and the way it was not effectively described by mainstream media or effectively by Democrats to explain it is part of it. So, but propaganda certainly had a role in the perception. The reason I think Harris lost across the board a certain amount of ground, a couple of percent, is because the economy was the anchor on her, and it's a perception of the economy, not the actual economy.
Let's go to Bill from Oconomowoc. Good morning to you, Bill. Your thoughts? Bill. All right. Let's go to Brendan from New Jersey. Good morning to you, Brendan. You say what?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the hypocrisy within the Christian religion is just beyond the pale. Like the other caller said, why all of a sudden are we a Christian country? We are a country of immigrants, multiple religions. This was nothing more than angry white people, which I made this comment to you guys over 2 months ago, that the MAGA crowd is just an angry bunch of white folks that don't like the fact that, first of all, a female was going to be president and a black female was going to be president. This is more about racism in this country. And, for all the people that are listening that voted for this knucklehead, you shall reapeth what you sow. The economy's fine, and there's no problem with it right now. And this whole misconception that the economy, that he's going to save our country, and that for the poor guy working at Walmart for whatever they're willing to pay him, forget your overtime, folks. Forget unions, folks. Get back into reading Project 2025 and prepare yourself for what's about to come, because it's coming, and now we can't stop it. And so thank you all for making this happen.
Hey, Brendan, thank you very much for the call. Any response from Sandy or Dr. Craig?
Well, I think. Oh, go ahead, Sandy. You go first.
No, go. Well, the only thing I would have to say is that there's two potentials that happen when someone who gets elected is presumably as unreliable and impulsive as Donald Trump has seemed to be, and that is that people around him channel that and control that, which seemed to have happened in the last administration. However, I think what we have to be concerned about is that he appeared to learn his lesson from that last administration. And it appears that he's not going to surround himself with people like that. So, you put a crown in the White House, and either the White House prevails or the place becomes a circus. And I do think we have to worry about that. I think that we need to have a vigilant watch over what it is that's going to happen, because we can't have an FBI serving at the pleasure of the president. We can't have a Justice Department that is a tool for the White House. We can't destroy the Department of Labor. We can't get rid of the Department of Education. And a bunch of these things that are talked about are real serious problems and issues.
All right, 855-752-4842, very special edition of the Earl Ingram Show. Dr. Robert Craig and my co-host Sandy Williams and you. All right, welcome back to what, unfortunately, in the last few minutes of a special edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 855-752-4842. My co-host Sandy Williams is with us, as well as Dr. Craig. Let's go right back to the phone lines. Let's go to Bob from Waukesha. Good morning to you, Bob. You say what? Bob from
Hello.
Waukesha. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
should say morning. When to you and all your listeners, just think of this. People that think like CJ are going to be running this country. It's a sad thought. And it's a sad day for America. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to Bill from Oconomowoc. Good morning to you, Bill. You say what?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, real quick. Let's not cry in our beer. Let's kind of celebrate a little bit of this. Since the majority of Americans think this is the way to go, we can be very observant in the next 2 years, but they've only got about 800 days to get their act together. And then we got another election. So if they're right, we're giving them plenty of time to show us how right they are. But if they're wrong, they're going to fall on their face so hard that they might not come back. This started many years ago with Newt Gingrich and Citizens United, where you could literally buy your way into government, and here's where we are.
All right.
But let's not be upset. America's got it. Guys, have a good day.
Bill, thank you very much. Let's go to Don from Milwaukee. Good morning to you, Don. You say what? Don. All right.
Am I on? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead
sorry.
quickly.
Yeah, I hate to tell you, gentlemen, but democracy is dead. He has everything on his side. He's got the Senate on his side. He's got the House on his side. He's got Fox News. He's going to make a special cabinet for Elon Musk. Lots of luck. Guess what? He gave you the middle finger, and you dumbbells voted for him anyway. Now you're going to suffer.
Hey, Don, thank you very much for the call. Dr. Craig, you want to say what in closing?
Yeah, the last two callers had different views on democracy. I think it to be determined, because let's look at Wisconsin and what happened in 2010, not just in Wisconsin, but the red sweep of 2010 and the Tea Party rebellion. Republicans immediately went to change redistricting, so only Republicans would win, and we've had no chance of Democratic majorities until now because of the maps. And they did Act 10 to undercut one of the fundamental pillars of power for the Democratic Party, and they went after trial lawyers, another one. And so the question is, will this Trump presidency try to find a way so that they cannot lose the next election, when Trump will be turned down unless they amend the Constitution or ignore it, and we would have J.D. Vance most likely as the standard bearer. And if they do try to do that, then we need to look to other peaceful mechanisms. But either way, The only solution to this is peaceful resistance and winning. Hopefully, it could be won just in 4 years. I just say we got to cut greenhouse emissions by 2030, and this takes us to 2028. This is very dangerous for the stability of the climate, and therefore what makes it possible to have human civilization.
Sandy?
Well, it's a difficult day. Let's put it that way. And I, like I said, the Republicans best learn lessons from history, and they best be careful about how they perform, because they will be blamed for the consequences of their incumbent. And the things that have been proposed in the policy discussion during the campaign by Donald Trump are hopefully not things that will be installed into our government, and that Project 2025, the blueprint that was built for him by the conservative wing of the party, has lots of things in it that are going to be very disturbing to the American public.
Guys. I know I've been frustrated before after elections, presidential elections, and those things passed, and this too shall pass. And the Dr. Craig, you and your organization, after all the hard work you put in during this election, you don't take a break. You don't you just now preparing. You're going to be preparing, I guess, to address what's coming.
Absolutely. The question is, like after the 2016 election, remember we had the big fight to save the Affordable Care Act, and a lot of people thought it wasn't doable, and it was. We have the first major American investment to prevent runaway climate change, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is causing a massive number of jobs and a huge number of things in Milwaukee, and that's increasing. And then in Wisconsin, we have a state Supreme Court race again that could determine whether or not there's any possibility of Democrat power. If the Supreme Court switches hands, not only will abortion potentially be illegal again, but the maps could be rigged again.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Craig. We'll see you in a week. Sandy, we'll see you again on tomorrow. Thank everybody who made the show go. Thank you, Calvin. Our phone lines will always be open, and those of us who have grown accustomed to kind of doing this every morning, we thank you. And that hasn't ended. We'll continue. Start anew on tomorrow. You've been tuning. Up next, Jane Madnair and Greg Bott. Madnair on air. You've been tuned into a very special edition of the Earl Ingram Show. See you later.
Just call me if you need a friend. Call me.
Jane says.
Good morning. Welcome to Matt Mayer on Air. Jane Matt Mayer, Greg Bach, and Calvin Butenhoff, all coming to you live from Civic Media's world headquarters here in Madison, Wisconsin. You can always join us. You can call, you can text. The number is the same, 855-752-4842. Leave a comment if you're watching on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and what used to be Twitter. Dan Schaefer from the recombobulation area.
There you go.
It's the words. Words are tricky.
Words are tough.
Tricky words.
Yeah.
He will be here at 10:33. Coming up after the 11 o'clock news, State Senator Dianne Hesselbein in the 27th Senate District will join us to talk about some of the election results. And of course, as we do every day now, we wrap it up with, is that this shouldn't be a thing? Stick around for that. This is a cheese grater update.
An update. Yes.
Cheese grater update. Coming your way at 11:51. Yes, it is Wednesday, November 6th. Things did not necessarily work out the way that we had hoped.
Agreed. Yes. Lots of scenarios to work through. Still getting more information from states to be called, but what we do know is that Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States of America.
Correct. He was declared the winner in Wisconsin early this morning.
Yes.
AP called the race for Donald Trump shortly after 4:30 local time. Unofficial results, this is from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, showing Donald Trump with about a 1-point edge, approximately 41,000 votes on Kamala Harris. That was after more than 95% of the votes were tabulated in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes brought Trump over the 270 threshold and cemented his return to the White House as the 47th president. Of course, many, many other races on the ballot last night.
Yes.
And Wisconsin did have some victories.
Yes, we did. And that's one thing, we definitely want to talk about is that I think Wisconsin had a big victory last night as far as when it comes to the fair maps.
Absolutely.
And what comes to when we do have fair maps, which is better choices in candidates for elections. And there's definitely some great winners in there, going to bring their expertise and their passion for Wisconsin to Madison in the upcoming year.
Yeah, definitely. In the 14th Senate District, Democrat Sarah Kayuski defeated Republican Joan Ballweg, That's in the 14th Senate District by about a 2% margin. Ballweg, a longtime lawmaker, and Kayuski is a mental health counselor who has no previous political experience. Ballweg was the incumbent, but the new district had changed, referring to the fair maps. They were vastly different than the lines that held under the old map. The new seat includes all of Richland and Sauk counties and parts of several others, including Dane County. So that victory to Democrat Sarah Kayuski.